Y'all, welcome to this episode on patching! This technique that I'm about to show you, we're gonna see an iteration of it later on in my transplanting episode where we take parts of graphic shirts and put them onto jackets and sweaters, but today I'm teaching you the simple patching. And I have this I have this shirt that I've been putting on everything, and this is just an old lady blouse with an amazing pattern that I found at the Dig and Save in Madison, Wisconsin, one of my favorite places. And I love this shirt because it reminds me that when I'm thrifting, to just kind of feel the energy and like look for patterns and colors that call to me rather than getting caught on, oh, is this flattering? Because this shirt was not flattering. But the pattern, the pattern is so good. The color scheme, so beautiful. It is what is on these pockets. I've put it on many articles of clothing already. This is part of the sleeve, like I said. We're gonna patchwork with it. With patching, I like to just cut out random organic shapes, and we're gonna use a variation of the single stitch to patch it on to our clothes. And so you don't wanna cut too small of a shape. I want this yellow in here. So I'm gonna cut randomly, really randomly, you're gonna see. And because this fabric is fairly frail, I wanna avoid cutting any too small of pieces because it will legitimately just shred. And so the bigger, the better for me. Also, you know, if you're making a fabric collage, it'll take up a good amount of space. That's always a very wonderful thing. So I cut off the hem as well. And my scissors are really sticky. I recommend getting good scissors for any fabric projects. So I cut out this piece. And I might even make this more organic. For this video, let's do something fun that I did on those shorts. I'm gonna fold it in half, and then, I don't know if you did this in elementary school, but you're making like a donut. And you're gonna cut out a little-ish middle piece without going towards the edges, if that makes sense. Oh, nice. Now we have this like very interesting donut eyeball piece. And then I have this piece that I can also patch on. It's getting a little small, but it will work. So anyways, I come around to the back and I just find a place, maybe around this tag. Yeah, I kind of like what's happening there. And you know, it's covering up one of these X's that I made in the last video, but I like where it is, and I think that's the fun thing with the embroidery is like you end up covering things up and they change as you make it, and just that fluidity of allowing the process to unfold is really special. And so I could just hold it on here, but I'm actually going to use a couple pins to keep it in place just because it's such a big piece. So let's do 3, and I count them because if you lose track, they'll stab you. I'm just gonna kind of anchor it in place where I want it to be. Just a general idea. And like, you know, as you sew it and embroider it on, it'll kind of change. The fabric will pull different ways. As you keep embroidering it, you just want to keep checking in and see, okay, how does this fabric lie on the piece? You know, and do I need to adjust to make sure that it's flat? And so, oh gosh, I pinned it to my pants. Pins. Freaking trying to kill me all the time. Okay, so with this, I've already used a little bit of green on here. And so I just really like this pinkish red color. I think that it's super vibrant. I'm gonna take, gosh, it's kind of tangly. Okay, I find the end. I take that kind of elbowy arm length piece and a snip. And we do the same thing. We're gonna load the thread. We tie our knot. 2 knots. Lick the end. All right. Oh, that went in nice and smooth. Locked and loaded. So we're gonna come up from the bottom, and I'm gonna start with this inner circle. Essentially, we're gonna embroider around these edges. And I'm gonna come up. I'm gonna do it starting in this fabric. I'm gonna come up, and then I'm gonna come down on the edge, and then pop my needle back up right next to that other stitch. So I'm essentially making like a loop or a coil going around, and you're just gonna keep going at that. So I'll show you one more time. We pop down on the outside of the patch, and then up on the inside of the patch. And depending on your angle, you can change this up a little bit of your order, but this is how I'm showing you. Down on the inside where the fabric is, and then up onto the patch, making this coil. And because this patch is shreddy, like this is not a thick fabric, I'm gonna make my stitches really close together. I'm basically gonna mend it onto the fabric because otherwise it'll start to fray if I do the stitches too separated. I'm gonna do this all on the inside and then I'll pop back in just a moment. If you can see, there's this gap right here where my fabric is starting to fray, and I can go back around over this and close in the gaps. So there's little gaps, and I can go in and reinforce that if I want to. And you're gonna have to load your needle a few times, and you might think, oh my god, I'll just use a longer string. And I'm gonna tell you right now, no, you're not, because it's going to cause so many tangles when you use it that it'll actually take more time to try and use a longer string. So keep it forearm length, and I promise it'll be so much easier. And then at this point I only have a little down, but I took out those pins because I hate the pins, they stab me. And then also I'm just going to continue to smooth and adjust the fabric as I sew it on, which actually makes it less likely to have weird bunches, because when I pinned it, it was one way, but as I sew it, it kind of like morphs onto the fabric. And so if I try and follow it with the pins in, it's gonna be bunchy because it's not adjusting for the way that the fabric changes. And so you just literally keep making this loop all through the edge. You can create varying like lengths of how big your loop is. You want to keep it though going onto the fabric almost like your pinky nail length, because if you get too far to the edge, like I said, the fabric will just release, untangle from the patch, and it'll fall off. So a pinky nail length is good, and you can make the stitches even bigger, like up to 1/2 inch, and create a varying line that is either just completely random or that like gets bigger and smaller, which can be really visually appealing. And then once you've gone around the inside and the outside, it's gonna look something like this. So as you can see, I used one color to go around the inside and one color to go around the outside. And then I began to add those same loop stitches kind of growing off of it. And I used the middle leftover piece. I kind of cut it smaller, and then I made kind of this eyeball thing going around. And then as you can see, there's just regular straight stitches around it. And here as well, here are all these different patches that I cut abstract. I sewed around them with that loop, and then I added on the same looping stitch, just growing on the outside. And this is what I mean where you can create smaller and then have it grow and then shrink. And I just organically do this. And then accompanying it, we see all of these little single straight stitches and then some X's. And these in a collage make for a really unique piece. And the thing is, I started this and I was like, oh, I don't like it. And I just kept going and it began to grow. And it's kind of like my tattoo sleeve. I love all my tattoos, but the reason I got a sleeve is because in that collage, if a piece like this one that I tried to do myself looks kind of funky, it's not going to be too obvious that it looks funky. That is a really, for me, an efficient tactic for art, is to just keep adding stuff. And then you begin to find like where you want to stop, where you want to keep going. And these organic patterns, if you feel dissatisfied when you keep adding and altering, then it begins to take on a life of its own and reveal itself. So it might just start off as lines, and then all of a sudden you're like, that kind of looks like a bird. And then you go with that, and then you're like, wait, that doesn't look like a bird anymore. It looks like this. And then you allow the piece to take on its own life and tell you how it wants to look. That is how we put on our little abstract patches. I hope you guys love this episode. All right, happy patching, y'all. Stay tuned for the next episode, which is darning.